Paul Orndorff, better known to wrestling fans around the world as Mr. Wonderful, was once right at the top of the wrestling world. He was a headliner, a WrestleMania main eventer, and one of the most intense personalities ever to step foot in the ring. But behind the muscle, the power, and the promos was a man slowly falling apart, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The rise of Paul Orndorff was incredible, but the fall, it was heartbreaking. This is the sad fall of a WWE legend. Paul Orndorff didn't come from the wrestling spotlight. He wasn't the son of a promoter or part of a famous family. He was a football player from Florida with a bad temper, a relentless work ethic, and a body built like a Greek statue. He played college football at the University of Tampa and was drafted by the NFL's New Orleans Saints, but injuries cut his football dreams short. That's when he turned to professional wrestling, a world that would make him famous and eventually break him down. He started in the territories working for Mid-Southern Wrestling and Georgia Championship Wrestling. Early on, fans could see that Orndorff was different. He had the intensity of a pit bull and the cockiness of a movie villain. He didn't smile. He didn't pander. He just went out there and hit hard, moved fast, and looked like he meant every single thing he said. He wasn't a character. He was Paul Orndorff. When Vince McMahon saw him in the early 80s, he knew he had something special. McMahon brought him into the WWF and gave him a new identity, Mr. Wonderful. Paired with Roddy Piper as his manager, Orndorff became one of the top villains in the company. And in 1985, he was placed in the spotlight of spotlights, the main event of the very first WrestleMania. It was Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul. That told you everything you needed to know about how high WWE thought of him. But Orndorff wasn't just a villain. He was a believable threat. He was strong, explosive, and one of the most well-conditioned athletes in the company. When he eventually turned babyface and teamed with Hogan, the crowd embraced him. But in a shocking twist, Orndorff turned on Hogan in 1986, setting up one of the hottest feuds in wrestling history. Their rivalry drew massive crowds.
Oh, no!
One of their matches in Toronto drew over 60,000 people. They battled in steel cage matches, grudge matches, and house show main events for months. In many ways, Orndorff was Hogan's most credible opponent at the time. He was a better athlete, a tougher talker, and he brought a level of realism that few others could. But here's the part fans didn't know. Orndorff was seriously injured during that run. He tore a nerve in his neck that affected his right arm. The muscle began to atrophy, losing size and strength. But instead of taking time off, Orndorff kept wrestling. He didn't want to lose his spot. He was afraid that if he left to heal, someone else would take his place. So, he kept going. Match after match, night after night. The result? Permanent damage. His right arm shrunk noticeably compared to his left. If you watch footage from 1987 on, you'll see it. His once perfect symmetry was gone. The injury not only limited his in-ring performance, it changed the trajectory of his entire career. By the time he finally took time off, WWE had moved on. New stars were rising, the spotlight had shifted. Orndorff returned briefly in 1987, but it wasn't the same. In 1988, Paul Orndorff quietly left WWE. He wrestled in smaller promotions and eventually landed in WCW, where he had some success in the early 90s. He won the WCW Television Championship and formed the tag team Pretty Wonderful with Paul Roma. They even won the WCW tag team titles, but he was no longer a headliner. The charisma was still there, but the injuries had taken their toll. He couldn't move the same. He couldn't lift the same. He couldn't perform at the level he once did. Still, Orndorff stayed in the business. He became a trainer at WCW's power plant, where he helped mold young talent, including Goldberg. He was known as a no-nonsense, tough-as-nails instructor who believed in pushing the body and mind. He wanted his students to respect the business. He gave them the same kind of tough love he gave himself. That was the kind of man Orndorff was, but his own body kept breaking down. In the early 2000s, Paul was diagnosed with cancer in his lymph nodes. It was a terrifying time, but he fought back and beat it. He seemed to be turning a new chapter. In 2005, WWE inducted him into the Hall of Fame. Fans gave him a standing ovation. His speech was heartfelt and full of old-school passion. For a moment, The spotlight returned, and it felt like justice. But behind the scenes, things were not okay. Years of taking headshots, slams, and chair shots began catching up with Orndorff. He developed symptoms of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. His son, Travis, began noticing signs: memory loss, confusion, personality changes. Eventually, the man who once cut electric promos could barely put together a sentence. It got so bad that Travis shared heartbreaking videos of Paul on social media, showing the devastating effects of brain trauma. It was painful to watch. Fans who remembered Mrwonderful at his peak were now seeing a man who looked lost in his own body. The videos weren't meant to embarrass him. They were a cry for help, a call for awareness. Travis wanted people to see what could happen to wrestlers after the cheers faded and the cameras stopped rolling. He wanted the world to remember that his father gave everything to the business and paid the ultimate price. Paul Orndorff died on July 12, 2021, at the age of 71. Wrestlers from every generation paid tribute. Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and others remembered how intense, passionate, and fearless Paul was. Fans filled social media with clips, photos, and stories. For a few days, the world remembered Mrwonderful, but it shouldn't stop there. Because Paul Orndorff's story is more than just a highlight reel. It's a warning. He didn't fall because he was reckless. He fell because he was loyal. Loyal to a business that demanded everything and gave very little back. He kept working through injuries because that's what the job demanded. He gave up his long-term health for the sake of the show. And in the end, when he needed help the most, the business had already moved on. Yet despite all of that, despite the pain, the memory loss, the fading away, Paul Orndorff remained proud. He never stopped believing in hard work. He never asked for pity. He never turned on the fans. That's what makes his fall so tragic and so heroic. He was a legend. Not because of how many titles he won, but because of how much he gave. Paul Orndorff gave everything he had, physically, emotionally, mentally, until there was nothing left. So when you hear the name Mrwonderful, don't just think of a gimmick. Think of the man who helped build WrestleMania. Think of the man who went toe-to-toe with Hulk Hogan and nearly stole the spotlight. Think of the man who trained the next generation, even as his own body broke down. And think of the man who gave so much and quietly suffered when the world looked away. If this story made you reflect on the real cost of wrestling, then take a second to honor Paul Orndorff. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what's your favorite memory of Mrwonderful? Let's keep his legacy alive. Not just the muscle, not just the promos, but the man.